Hello again, my name is Mark Silver. I'm a forensic psychiatric social worker and lawyer with a background in psychology, political science, and a few other things. I've seen several thousand cases in the last 20 years of practice, and I generally evaluate individuals and families for immigration, criminal, and civil litigation lawyers. One of my key areas of focus is criminal mitigation, and that's going to be the topic for today, with a special emphasis on, I think, the single most omitted concern by and strategic focus of criminal defense lawyers, and that is borderline personality disorder. And the subtitle for today's program is Pre-Plea and Pre-Sentence Criminal Mitigation Strategies. I really like to integrate theory with practice. Please don't hesitate to send me an email, and I'll send you back a redacted copy of a sample. Put in the subject line borderline sample, and I'll send you back an actual case that I've worked on, or even two cases that integrate the PowerPoint slides that I have that I do in my teaching seminars with real individuals who have gotten themselves in obviously very serious problems in the criminal justice system. So the book I'd recommend obviously is my own, but in all seriousness, Borderline Personality Disorder, Survival Guide from Chaos to Authenticity. It came out just this year, 2024. This book, and we're going to be talking about this, takes a broader look, a more holistic look at the person's presentation of borderline personality disorder, including not just DSM-5 criteria, but also a special consideration for how the person actually functions. And that's something very crucial to understand in mental health in general, particularly for lawyers that see clients that have mental health issues, which is very common for criminal defense lawyers, obviously. Understanding not just pathology, but functioning. And that's something we're going to be considering today. I have other books as well, which I have on my website, which you're welcome to look at. I want to first give an overview of my specialty areas within mitigation. Obviously, borderline personality disorder, which we're going to look at today. I have a separate program on pre-sentence investigation reports done by probation officers because I found them to be extremely deficient in many ways. They don't accurately look at the person's background, psychosocial history, mental health problems, family, community considerations, and so on. So I have a special program on that in the context of sex crimes. I just want to let you know, these are programs, these are CLEs that I've done over many years now. Many of them I've done several times. I think they've been heard by literally tens of thousands, if not more, viewers in the United States. I've really tried to encourage the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers and more local associations to have all of these programs included as available CLEs. I've done a few of them, but really what I'm trying to do with this YouTube channel is make this information available for everybody completely for free, including those people who may not have the resources to access as many CLE programs, but I want them to have equal access to the information in support of their clients and for advocacy. I do programs on complex trauma, which I've already uploaded to YouTube, white collar crime, which I've uploaded, domestic violence, which is coming, criminal mitigation in the context of immigration defense work, and other kinds of cases and issues. So I just want to begin with a general overview of criminal mitigation. Mitigation is a biopsychosocial evaluation of the client's social and psychological history informed by the facts of the criminal case, with appropriate recommendations as a means to minimize the negative legal outcome, either in court or with a prosecutor. Mitigating circumstances reduces the degree of moral culpability or blame, which in fairness, sympathy, or mercy may lead to a more favorable outcome for the defendant. This is so crucial for our clients who have borderline personality disorder, because so much of their life, their thoughts, their feelings, their behavior reflect dysfunction and issues that really are quite sympathetic when understood properly. So especially for these kinds of clients, we want to humanize the clients through a sympathetic narrative. Borderlines at times can be quite unsympathetic, and we want to induce empathy so that the reader really understands the client's life history, psychosocial background, and so that the client's conduct is contextualized. And that's something we're going to look at very, very closely today in this program. We always want to understand the client's family life, but also community life, education, employment ties, to show the client's remorse, regret, and so on. Very importantly, professional expression can replace self-expression. And by this I mean, especially with those with borderline personality disorder, it's very difficult for them to advocate for themselves or even to understand their own problems. These are very complex psychological and psychiatric issues. So on the one hand, it's a mental health report, the mitigation report for the client with borderline personality disorder, but it's also very holistic. It considers broadly not just their mental health, but their functioning, their life, their development, and so on. And this helps us to disabuse prosecutor, judge of bias and prejudice about this person, because this person may be, in some sense, superficially manipulative or controlling or coercive. And we want to have the reader of the report understand that this is a person with serious issues. The legal basis for mitigation is well known, but I'll just repeat it here. Of course, criminal mitigation is not simply an effective tool for the sake of argument, but is a necessary factual underpinning to support the factors in 18 U.S.C. 3553A and other relevant law. The court now has unfettered discretion to consider any and all evidence at sentencing because of Booker. And of course, from 18 U.S.C. 3661, the famous line, "No limitation shall be placed on the information concerning the background, character, and conduct of a person convicted of an offense, which a court of the United States may receive and consider for the purpose of imposing an appropriate sentence." So important for clients with borderline personality disorder, because these are individuals with a broad range of background, character, and conduct issues that really help to inform the court about the person's judgment and the person's decision-making. Especially with borderlines, for mitigation purposes, it's never too early to begin mitigation. You know what they say in Chicago, vote early, vote often. Especially for these kinds of cases, giving a peace offering to the prosecutor so that they're better informed about the client's mental health issues and background can be very helpful. And if it's not so helpful, the reality is that basically the exact same report can be used for sentencing purposes. It's crucial to understand, again, that the pre-sentence investigation report done by probation will not have any insight or understanding of borderline personality disorder. And I'm not trying to be very one-sided about this, but I've spoken to many of these individuals and I've read countless probation reports, and it's simply not their orientation, it's not their training, and they're not clinicians. This is especially important because of what's known now as the trial penalty, which is that, it's just become exorbitantly difficult to go to trial because of cost and shame and embarrassment. But the outcome, the negative outcome from being found guilty, can be very, very serious as opposed to taking a plea. This is an extremely important issue for borderlines, because borderlines are at times quite impulsive. They could be risk takers, and they may not have the capacity to properly evaluate the risks and benefits in making such decisions. I think, especially for clients with borderline personality disorder, that mitigation should be obligatory. Obviously, counsel, obligatory defense work came in with the 1963 U.S. Supreme Court case of Gideon v. Wainwright. But I'm wondering if it shouldn't be obligatory now for criminal mitigation experts, so that the courts and the prosecutor, but frankly also the criminal defense lawyer himself or herself, gains a better understanding about who the client is, especially in felony cases, and a sense of the person's decision making. And very, very often, so many of these clients have had traumas and challenges and personal issues that have really negatively affected their lives, including systemic harms that the person may have suffered in childhood. So let's get into what a personality disorder is before we look at specifically borderline personality disorder. A personality disorder is an enduring pattern of inner experience and behavior that deviates from the norm of the individual's culture. The pattern is seen in two or more of the following areas: cognition, affect, interpersonal functioning, or impulse control. By cognition, I mean the person's ability to understand things in general and process information. So this enduring pattern is inflexible and pervasive across a broad range of personal and social situations. Typically leads to significant distress or impairment in social work or other areas of functioning. The pattern is usually stable and of long duration, and its onset can be traced back to early adulthood or adolescence, and frankly even childhood. There are many kinds of personality disorders. They're almost completely, I wouldn't say ignored, but pushed to the side at the expense of considering more well-known psychiatric issues such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, and so on. But there are many kinds of personality disorders that very much reflect and help us understand the issues that pertain to the client. And today, obviously, we're going to look at borderline personality disorder. So the main feature of borderline personality disorder is a pervasive pattern of instability in interpersonal relationships, self-image, and emotions. People with borderline personality disorder are also usually very impulsive, sometimes demonstrating self-injurious behaviors, risky behaviors in particular. Borderline personality disorder occurs in most by early adulthood, although, as I noted, it can be often spotted earlier than that. The unstable pattern of interacting with others has often persisted for years and is usually closely related to the person's self-image and early social interactions. The pattern is present in a variety of settings, not just work, not just home, and often accompanied by similar lability, meaning there's a fluctuating sense of their mood. They often have unstable moods, erratic behaviors, and so on. These individuals are very sensitive to environmental circumstances. The perception of impending separation or rejection or the loss of external structure can lead to profound changes in self-image, affect, cognition, and behavior. Borderlines experience intense abandonment fears, inappropriate anger, even when faced with a realistic time-limited separation or when there is an unavoidable change in plans. Borderlines may believe that this abandonment implies that they are bad or unwanted, and these abandonment fears are often related to an intolerance of being alone and a need to have other people with them. Relationships and the person's emotions may sometimes be seen by others or characterized as being shallow. What I'd like to do now with that introduction is go through the DSM-5 criteria, but with a real case. And this was a case I had a number of years ago. This was a woman who was about 35 years old. She had a 7-year-old daughter, Jewish family in New York. Her parents came from Europe. The family were Holocaust survivors from Eastern Europe. They focused on education. The father did well. He went to medical school and became a physician. The client had grown up in a home where there was various kinds of emotional and verbal abuse, as one can imagine, from first-generation immigrants, of a family of Holocaust survivors where she had lost a great deal of her family due to anti-Semitism in Europe. This woman had a difficult time in many ways and was working in her father's office, assisting in the medical practice, basically with paperwork. The issue was that she stole multiple prescription pads and then gave those prescription pads to her drug-abusing boyfriend, who obviously filled them out. My client forged her father's signature, and these prescriptions were sold on the streets. That's the long and short of the case, and I want to look at the criteria of now borderline personality disorder and see how this fits in. So the first formal DSM criteria is frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. These are people that have deep fears of being alone or abandoned. They perceive rejection as being fatal. They can be quite dramatic or attention-seeking in that they display behavior to keep people around them so they don't feel alone and isolated and vulnerable. They have a deep need to be loved. There's this great line I have in my book. I can't remember where I got it from, but she didn't know who would leave or stay, so she pushed them all away. So on the one hand, there's frantic efforts to avoid abandonment by keeping people close, but at the same time pushing people away because of frantic efforts of being alone. Some of these frantic efforts can be quite panic-like in nature and quite destabilizing. So the client is with this drug-abusing boyfriend because her self-esteem is horribly low. She cannot encompass being abandoned. She grew up in this pathological home with Holocaust survivors. She was abused, and she keeps this boyfriend in her life because she knows this is a person who's not going to abandon her. He is dependent on her. He's drug abusing. He's dependent on her for his own emotional support, and it's a toxic, codependent, pathological relationship, but it works for her in a limited way. A pattern of unstable and intense interpersonal relationships is the next criteria, characterized by alternating between extremes of idealization and devaluation. Many of these clients rely on others to regulate them. They have unhealthy, dangerous relationships with family and even with people in the community. They are often in and out of love. There's meaningful relationships that they experience, and they have poor ego differentiation, meaning they can't very well differentiate between their own needs and the needs of someone else. And here in this case, we have this client. She's working in her father's medical office, assisting him, and she has multiple unstable relationships with her family members. She has multiple boyfriends over many years with whom she has superficial relationships. And even her own boyfriend now that's abusing drugs, it's also an unstable, unhealthy relationship. But nonetheless, it helps to regulate her. It gives her some semblance of security. Identity disturbance is the next criteria. Significant and persistent unstable image, poor self-image, poor self-esteem. Many of these clients vicariously contend with their personal issues through something called projective identification. They have a lot of anger. They have a relationship with someone who also has internally a lot of anger, and they deal with their anger vicariously. These clients have distorted identity. They have discontinuity in their identity. And with this client in particular, she did not develop a healthy identity in her childhood because of the abuses that she suffered in her family of origin. And she explains her identity. She understands herself as against other people. She understands herself through the needs and through the identity of other people. So, for example, with her drug-abusing boyfriend, this is a toxic relationship, but she clearly gains something from his bravado, from his ability to sell drugs in the community. She's very doubtful about her identity. She has low self-esteem, and she sees him as brave and able. Similarly, she has terrible identity disturbance from her family of origin with Holocaust survivors who themselves suffered overwhelming trauma going through the Second World War. And when she identifies with them, she internalizes and identifies with their own PTSD. Many borderline suffer from this next criteria, which is impulsivity. This is potentially self-damaging behaviors, including wild spending, erratic sex, substance abuse, reckless driving, binge eating. Many of these clients seem to be living on the edge. They're very self-damaging. They're involved in self-injurious behaviors at times through the impulsivity. They often have knee-jerk reactions in terms of their thoughts and behaviors when things come up. So, when this client takes the prescription pads, it's not like she's taking huge boxes of them, but she takes them impulsively. She takes single pages and she takes the pads impulsively without really thinking, without thinking through the consequences, even though this is such a self-damaging act. Many of these clients have recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures, threats, or self-mutilating behaviors. Some of them would just soon as well be dead unless someone can really confirm that they remain alive. In other words, they have such a terrible, overwhelming sense of pain that and emptiness inside that they need someone to confirm that they're alive. Many have cutting to self-regulate emotions, superficial cutting on the arm or very often the thighs. The cutting can be to alleviate feelings of emptiness or even provide relief or diminish pain, or actually cause pain to confirm that the person is alive. Sometimes it can be quite paradoxical. Some of these clients have terrible self-anger, self-hatred. They feel they may need to be punished for their wrongdoing. This client identifies with her drug-abusing boyfriend, who is also, frankly, very self-destructive. He leads a life of drugs. He's on the street a lot. Their relationship is sort of impulsive, but she sort of lives through him and understands her pathologies and depression and suicidality through his own lifestyle. And many of these clients, therefore, have emotional instability. Their moods may go up and down. They may react quite irritably on a moment's notice. They may have episodic dysphoria or euphoria, and it can last for sometimes just a short time, but it can sometimes last for several hours, and they may hold a grudge and remain angry in the context of their emotional instability. Some of this emotional instability can also be quite rageful. The person can be very, very angry with a strong reaction to something that may seem to the outsider somewhat benign. So the person has emotional dysregulation, and part of this is that they have skewed perceptions of things. So things are very black and white, good and bad. They may have chronic feelings of emptiness. Their internal world is empty. They may feel worthless, helpless. They may devalue themselves. And this was certainly the case with the client. Her emotions go up and down. She finds she only gets any sense of internal calm through this relationship with her boyfriend. And she feels so worthless about herself and so hopeless that having this relationship with this complete loser, to her, is really not such a bad thing. To her, it brings stability. Objectively, you think, what is this person from an upper middle class family doing with this drug abuser who's, half homeless? And the answer is, it's functional for her. She gains something. I'm not saying it's something that you or I would want or approve of, but we have to understand her subjective perception of her issues and needs. Many of these clients and some of these issues are overlapping, but they have an inappropriate or intense anger. They may be quite hypersensitive to things. They may have chronic discontentment due to lack of security or stability in their lives. They may always feel that they're at war with the world, that they feel the world is always against them, so they're always angry at the world. And they may respond quite disproportionately and rapidly with something called a raw skin. It's, some people, you just touch them, it feels like they're being burnt. That's how borderlines may respond. And this was certainly the case for this client in the home growing up. She had this intense anger and emotional lability and so on, and it was quite unsettling for her. So with her boyfriend, even though it's not the greatest relationship, it takes her out of the home and it gives her a very different kind of interpersonal dynamic that allows her to contend with her issues in a way that probably would not otherwise be possible. Some borderlines also contend with transient stress-related paranoid thoughts. It may not be obvious, but some borderlines really have psychosis. They're out of touch with reality. They may even have certain delusions and even hallucinations. And they may be quite guarded and suspicious, have a low sense of trust in others. They may even experience dissociative symptoms. This is psychosis. I know lawyers often think about psychosis in the context of schizophrenia in particular, or bipolar disorder. But the truth is, psychosis pops up in different areas of mental health that you should be aware of. I now want to look at a few non-DSM criteria that are very important in my mind. The first is cognitive dysregulation. And this means that the person has difficulty processing information. They may have confusion in their daily life, self-doubt, disorganization in daily life. They may have difficulty with attention or concentration. Their thoughts may be quite preoccupied, and they may have cognitive distortions of self and other. That is, they don't really see themselves or others as they really are. This is a huge area, I think, of borderlines that's not in the DSM and the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition, which I think helps flesh out key areas of the borderlines presentation. Many borderlines also have significant difficulty communicating with others, in the sense that they have difficulty explaining their internal turmoil or articulating their emotional or psychological issues. So you'll have a borderline that says, I'm just fine, but the borderline really means I'm not fine, I need help. The borderline may say, I'm just tired. Really mean the borderline may mean, I just can't take it anymore. A borderline may say, I already ate, when really she means, I starve myself. The borderline may say, go away, I'm fine, but really the borderline means, stay with me, show me enough you care, that you stay with me even in my darkest moment. The borderline may say, I'm just cold, when really they want to say, I don't want you to see my scars. The borderline may say, I'm better, I promise I'm better. Really the borderline is communicating, I've never been this bad, I've never been this depressed and down. The borderline may say, I'm okay, and really the borderline is trying to communicate in a dysfunctional way, I just want to die. Another major criteria, not in the DSM but is in my book, is poor self-preservation. I think this is absolutely key. Borderlines have a tendency to undermine their own best interests. They jeopardize their health and their safety in various ways, often through impulsivity, but in other ways as well. They may be quite disorganized in their daily life. They may be quite messy, and they often present in a kind of ADHD-ish way. But the bottom line is they can't take care of themselves. And not like you'd find in a young child, but someone who is just generally unable to attend to their daily needs in the way that best reflects who they are and what they want to achieve. Another major issue in this area is the quiet borderline. The quiet borderline is often not taken seriously enough or heard in time to make a difference. The quiet borderline does not act out, often has little impulsivity, and their issues are not externalized in the way that other people can see them and evaluate them or understand that something is really wrong. Many of these borderlines communicate in ways, as noted above, that are quite dysfunctional, so that they express outwardly, verbally, that things are generally okay and they feel stable, okay, and they're secure, but internally they're a complete mess and quite desperate. Many of the borderlines I have seen have behavioral dysregulation, meaning that they don't have a very good ability to function on a daily basis. They just seem to be disorganized. And it's not just like an ADHD issue. disorganized in their daily life with decisions and what needs to get done and prioritizing and so on. Another non-DSM issue is psychic pain. Borderlines experience psychic pain, helpless despair, and deep feelings of depression and hopelessness, which is not easily verbalized, but it's clearly there. Another area is the pity party, which is that many borderlines express perceived victimization. Woe is me. The world is against me. I never get a break. Everything goes wrong for me. And part of that might be true given the borderline's history and presentation. And part of it is a way for the borderline to allow themselves to remain in this perceived pitiful state so that they gain sympathy and perhaps even the social service and other supports that they need from family, community, and professionals. Some borderlines can also be quite manipulative, coercive, controlling. This is very important. This is often a way for them to actually regulate their own internal chaos. But it's important because these behaviors might make the borderline seem quite unsympathetic. And one of the things I said at the outset, and I express this in a lot of programs, is you want to disabuse the prosecutor, judge, whoever, of false patterns, biases, and prejudices. And certainly with this client, she could be manipulative in some ways, particularly in stealing her father's prescription pads, and she made all sorts of problems for his private practice as a physician, as you can imagine. But, she really was not doing this with any kind of animus. She was doing this to gain internal self-regulation. Many of these clients have very poor insight into their own issues. They cannot articulate what their issues are or even their psychological or emotional problems. Their judgment is therefore not great. Many of them may express catastrophic thinking. That is when something goes wrong, rather than understand that issue in relationship to other issues or understand the seriousness of that particular issue on its own, they catastrophize and express that the whole world is imploding, the whole world is falling apart. This little issue will spider out, causing 10 other problems that'll make it impossible for that person to function or live any kind of meaningful life. So these are some of the non-DSM criteria that I have in my book. Again, I think would be very helpful to read. I also have a very broad section on surviving borderline personality disorder that I think would be a match for these issues. There's also an initial section on the book regarding conceptually how to understand borderlines and conceptually and practically how to undertake clinical evaluations in general. One of the good things about this disorder is that there's generally a positive prognosis in that there's several different kinds of therapies and interventions and supports. Many individuals experience a decrease in their impulsive behaviors in their 40s. And with proper therapy and support, much improvement is possible. It's more prevalent with females. It's estimated that it's between 1.6 and 5.9% of the population, which is higher than schizophrenia. It's a very serious disorder. About 10% of people who have borderline personality disorder ends in death. About a third of these clients have been the victims of abuse in childhood. Very often these clients have related issues, including very serious self-destructive behaviors with regard to alcohol and or drugs. And, you can test yourself as an attorney. Think, how often do I see clients with borderline personality disorder? The answer is you should be seeing this kind of client, quite frequently. And if you're not, Or if you think you're not, it may be because this person is not properly understood or diagnosed, and therefore the person is not really receiving proper advocacy. The borderlines tend to have at least one other issue, including alcohol or drugs, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, sometimes even learning disorders, ADHD presentations, developmental issues, and very, very often a history of family dysfunction. Some of these symptoms and presentations can actually be turned in a very positive way, which can be very helpful for mitigation purposes. So, for example, sensitivity to emotional and social cues, especially negative ones, can be also understood as empathy to the moods and thoughts of others, especially the suffering of others. While a client may be impulsive and quite reactive, the borderline may also be understood as someone who's quite spontaneous and enjoys excitement in their lives in a very positive way. The lack of boundaries between the borderline and other people may sound very negative, but it also allows the borderline to merge easily with different kinds of people and fall in love and try new things and experiment new things in life that sometimes other people are actually quite envious of. Sometimes intensely emotional symptoms can be reconfigured as the borderline being quite passionate and creative. Some borderlines who seem to be very vengeful are also borderlines who have a great sense of justice and they want to right wrongs. Some clients who seem to be very needy and have a fear of abandonment may actually be also people who have strong emotional attachments and can be quite pleasing to others and quite loyal to family and friends in their time of need. Some clients who have unstable sense of self can actually be paradoxically at times quite stable and therefore flexible. The major problem legally when seeing these clients is that they may refuse good legal advice. They may undermine the lawyer's strategy and jeopardize the case. Many of these borderlines never feel satisfied with their legal advice or with their criminal litigation expert. They have never-ending complaints. Many lawyers are concerned that they will have their reputations ruined, that the client may go to the bar to make a complaint. These clients may be exceedingly needy, which causes the lawyer to disproportionately devote time and energy and thought to this client, even though the client may have a relatively straightforward case. The client, because he's a borderline, may have poor ego differentiation. And so the client may find himself very often at the lawyer's office, always wanting to work with the lawyer, is in some sense in a positive way, but, it prohibits the lawyer from establishing healthy working boundaries with the borderline, and that's something that's absolutely crucial. And in many cases with the borderline, all of his problems becomes the professional's problems. In other words, the borderline goes to you because there's a criminal issue, and you're obviously a criminal defense lawyer that want to help in a professional way, providing criminal defense counsel, advice, strategy, direction, and so on. But really, the borderline is bringing to you all of his problems with his family and with his employer, all sorts of issues that are completely extraneous to the criminal issue at hand. So a few mitigation considerations then. Borderline personality disorder is perfect for mitigation because borderline personality disorder truly explains and contextualizes behavior and decision making, especially when there's concomitant disorders such as alcohol or drugs involved. Dysfunction and self-destructive behaviors that undermine the client's own best interests, which don't seem to make sense, can be understood in a sense rationally, but within the context of the criteria of borderline personality disorder. Because these clients have such a poor sense of self-preservation, fears, anxieties, patterns of problems, emotional dysregulation, turmoil, dysfunction, and so on, and a history of abuses, their criminal behavior can be reconceptualized within the context of the disorder itself. Many of these clients may appear high functioning, but in fact, you just scratch underneath the surface and there's someone who's very fragile and vulnerable, and you really get a sense of the human pathos. There are many treatment options that I said before, which is also great for mitigation purposes. These clients are not necessarily bad or evil. You need to reframe it to understand that they are at times perhaps even manipulative and coercive, but it's in the context of their mental health problems, and they need the proper evaluation and support, which is only possible if we allow empathy and understand these clients' issues. Often with traditional criminal mitigation, you think about clients who have made an aberrant decision. There's often misguided behavior. There's an error in judgments, foolish conduct that occurred in an unthinking moment. That's less true generally with borderline clients. With them, we usually think of clients who've suffered multiple serious stressors over many years, from early childhood and adolescence with multiple repeated harms, often because of abuse or neglect. And this adds up to diminished capacity. It's something I talk about a lot, and lawyers love it in the context of diminished capacity for full defense, the person's psychotic. But when I mean diminished capacity, I mean the person's general ability to make healthy decisions and provide good judgment in general is just impaired. In a sense, they're disabled. And understanding them in this light will help, I think, better explain them as not being bad or evil, but taking these considerations cumulative together, provide, I think, greater humanity as to who these individuals are. So borderline personality disorder, understand the criteria, the issues. It provides a means to understand behavior, thinking, and feeling with a broad understanding about the client's past, their behaviors, their needs, and it really feeds into mitigation and sentencing to understand what will promote justice, what will promote respect for the law, deterrence, what will the client's experience be like in jail. These are often clients who can really benefit from educational, vocational training, and obviously systemic psychiatric and other kinds of supports for rehabilitation. Many of these clients may have difficulty with accepting responsibility, but there can be, in fact, sincere and genuine contrition just underneath the surface. And many of them have started restitution. They're quite interested in righting the wrong. They're often prepared for a fit punishment, but we're looking for the least harsh alternative that would serve the individual, the family, the community, and so on. I want to thank you again. Sorry for it took a bit longer than I thought, but I think it's an absolutely essential area for criminal defense lawyers in the United States, who undoubtedly see far more clients with borderline personality disorder than they realize. And there's some differential issues that I also talk about in my book. Again, borderline personality disorder. But if there's one thing I'd get across as a conclusion, it's that we need to understand that these people are not bad or evil. They're fragile and vulnerable, and they suffer from multiple symptoms that are really quite debilitating. And when understood properly, it's really quite sympathetic. And hopefully we can get that across while also contextualizing their wrongdoing in the framework of the criteria of borderline personality disorder. Please don't hesitate to send me an email if you want a redacted sample of a case, or if you want to contact me or say hello for another reason. If you email me, please put borderline personality disorder sample in the subject line. Put all your information in the email. I won't send you back junk, I absolutely promise, but I just want to make sure it's not spam, it's from a real attorney. Thank you for listening. look at my other YouTube programs. I hope to upload other programs for criminal defense lawyers in the next month or two. Thank you.